And that goes for other eating sounds as well, like slurping soup. Oh my god. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Living with Misophonia. My name's Anna, I have misophonia, and I'm here to show you my world. So in my last video, I explained what misophonia is, I gave all the nitty-gritty details, how it affects people, how we cope with it, how we can lash out, the rage we feel, things like that. So if you're interested in watching that video, and if you want context for this one, I will be linking it above. So, for people who don't know, misophonia is a disorder that causes people to overreact to certain repeating sounds. So that can be pretty much anything, ranging from sniffling to chewing to the sounds of certain letters. And it's a very invisible illness in our society, even though it's really not that rare. I think it's invisible in this way, it's not that talked about, because there is so much shame associated with it, because us who have misophonia, we know how crazy we sound, so we just keep it to ourselves and suffer in silence or just leave. And most of us learn over the course of our lives how to not visibly react. So this week, I wanted to talk about the things that are harder for misophonic people that maybe you've never considered if you don't have misophonia. So number one on my list, going to the movies. Who, in the absolute flip, decided that popcorn, one of the crunchiest snacks, would be the ideal snack for eating in a room where everyone is silent? And it's not just popcorn. Like, being in an enclosed, dark space where you can't really leave without making a big fuss of it is a nightmare scenario for a misophonic person. Personally, I love going to the movies. I have a membership to go to my local cinema, so I go to like 2 movies a week. I love it. And the pandemic has really helped with that because most of the theaters I go to nowadays are pretty much empty. Usually there's 1 or 2 other people, and people are pretty conscientious. However, that is not always the case. The other day, I went to see Annette. Great movie, highly recommend, but I couldn't even pay attention to the movie because the people sitting directly in front of us in a theater where it was only the 4 of us were actively having sex, okay? They were having sex. I don't know, I didn't want to be a Karen about it. So basically, I just sat there the entire movie listening to squelching, slurping, just all sorts of wet, repulsive noises. But anyway, people are not very conscientious in movies. There's also always that one guy who is just eating snacks throughout the entire movie, and movie theater snacks are always in the loudest plastic bags. Like, this guy is trying to eat a Sour Patch Kids, and every time he reaches in, you have to hear the whole bag crinkle. So yes, as you can see from me getting visibly flustered, the movie theater can be a hellhole for people who have misophonia, such as myself. So number 2. Number 2 is family dinners and or any dinner that's not at a restaurant. You know, like, eating at restaurants typically isn't that bad for misophonic people. I mean, obviously it depends on the person and the scenario, but at least there's ambient music, there's people talking, things to kind of drown out the sound of other people chewing. Whereas if you're just at home, you can hear everything, okay? So when I was a kid, if it was dinner time, I would scarf down my plate as quickly as possible and then get the heck out of there, my friend. I would get the heck out of there. Misophonic people have different triggers, and a lot of them are specific to a certain person, but chewing is not one of those things. Usually, we're annoyed by everyone's audible chewing. So nowadays, chewing is one of those things that has not gotten easier for me to deal with, mostly because I feel like it's something that other people can and should control. Like, people who just eat food with their mouths open, or chew gum with your mouth open. Why you do that? So anyways, chewing has not gotten easier for me to deal with over the years, and Right now, the person who's chewing bothers me the most is my boyfriend's, just because I eat dinner with him all the time and we sit right next to each other on the couch when we do. So basically, for the past 4 years, we've just had to watch a show together or a movie every single time we eat a meal. Because if we're just sitting there eating in silence, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. I will go eat in a different room. I will get so upset that I will go upstairs and sit on the floor and eat my dinner. I can't deal with it. So the next one on my list, number 3, is long car rides. And this is really subjective because it depends on who you're going with, if you're listening to music. But for hypothetical purposes, let's say you're going on a road trip with your family. Like when I was a kid, my family would pretty much drive to every vacation we would go to instead of flying. So we drove to Florida, we drove to New York. So we were often in the car for 10 or more hours at a time. Oh my God. Sorry, I just had a flashback. So, yes, just imagine you are trapped in a tiny pod with 3 to 4 people, all of whom trigger you. And there's nothing you can do. You can't jump out of the car on the highway. So yes, long car rides with people who trigger you are hell. So on to number 4. Number 4. I have to be quieter now because my mom is home. Number 4 is sleeping. Yes, sleeping, the holiest of activities, can be torture for us. Or at least trying to fall asleep can be torture. Because if you're not sleeping alone, there tend to be noises, you know? Complete silence is pretty rare. I've had situations where I'm in a hotel room with people and I end up sleeping in the bathtub because one of them is breathing too loudly or snoring. I've stayed at hostels where someone in the room is snoring really loudly and I've had to stealthily wake them up by throwing stuff at them, a complete stranger, so that they could be awake long enough so that I could fall asleep and be asleep before they start snoring again. I know, don't judge me, I have a disorder. But even just sleeping with your significant other can be torture, which sucks because I am a very affectionate and loving person. I love to snuggle, and I would like nothing more than to fall asleep in my boyfriend's arms and stay that way the whole night. But unfortunately, I can only withstand it for a few minutes before I have to move to the opposite side of the bed and turn on white noise. And that's simply because I can hear him breathing. I can't hear any human sounds when I am trying to sleep. So that has caused much grief and loss of sleep in my life. Let's move on to number 5, which is school. And I'm saying school just to make this easier to follow, but it can also be working at a job or, taking a test. This one can be really rough because when you're a kid, you legally need to go to school. And when you're an adult, usually you have to work to live. And these environments can really take a toll on the mental health of people with misophonia because everything about them can be triggering to people. There are so many sounds that exist in the classroom. For example, typing, again, sniffling, chewing gum, and you're in an environment where you can't leave. Any place that you can't leave is a recipe for disaster for a misophonic person. I remember being a kid, and instead of stressing about studying for the ACT or studying for tests in general, I would be more worried about what sounds I was going to have to endure while I was taking those tests. In 5th grade, I remember taking a test and the kid next to me was sniffling, probably once every 2 or 3 seconds, and I broke my pencil because I was so upset. And I got to the point in high school where I just started skipping class rather than going to a class where I knew that I was going to be triggered repeatedly. For example, in my junior year, my 6th period class was math, which already is a subject I hate, but also the teacher, her S's triggered me. So I just started skipping that class as much as possible, several times a week. And I'm really lucky because school is very easy for me naturally. I don't know why. There are lots of other things that I'm not good at, but school has always just been an environment where I can achieve without putting in too much effort. And if that weren't the case, I'm sure that I would have flunked out, and I have so much sympathy for people who have misophonia who are going to school because, like, it's not easy. And the last one is living with people, living next to people, living adjacent to society. Pretty much anything where you have to deal with people's noises when you want silence. For example, I used to live with my boyfriend in his apartment, and the unit on the other side of the wall was an Airbnb. And it wasn't just any Airbnb, it was a party house. People would use this Airbnb to host events. You know, it wasn't just a quiet family coming for a weekend in the city. It was people who came to party. And so there would be a lot of nights where at 2 or 3 a.m. where people are loudly talking, playing music, you know, just partying, like having a good time. Since I have misophonia, it just doesn't fly. It doesn't fly for me. So I had many sleepless nights where I had to get my boyfriend to actually go down to the other side and knock on their door and ask them to quiet down so that I could sleep. And it's not just people being too loud. It's also people being perfectly courteous. Like, if I just hear someone talking in another room, that's a trigger for me. I don't know why, but it drives me freaking crazy. Human noises. There's so many. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that this video gives you some insight into the world of misophonia. As a misophonic person, I'm very aware of how my existence affects other people, because I'm also very aware of how their existence affects me. And this is a very stressful way to live your life. I'm constantly thinking about how I'm being perceived by other people, trying to be polite, trying to be courteous. And I hope no one watches this video and thinks that I am blaming other people for triggering me. I'm not. I know it's in my head, but I can't help that I'm bothered by it. And I just wanted to add in that only about 5 people in my real life know that I have misophonia. So I'm very secretive about it, and most people, when they trigger me, will have no idea that they're triggering me. They might notice that I get short with them, or maybe I start to step back and become reserved, but most people probably have no idea why I'm upset. And so for people who don't have misophonia, I just wanted to enlighten you on what people around you may be experiencing. Because again, misophonia is not uncommon. For how little it's talked about, you would think that it's a super rare thing, but really, it's not at all. So thanks so much for tuning in again for this episode of My Life with Misophonia, and I hope to see you back here next week. Bye.